But we start with the day after the ACC settlement, and a few reporters who cover the ACC pretty thoroughly. Brian Murphy, for example. Jim Phillips and the ACC deserve credit for coming up with solutions, expansion, added extra money, which could be spread around, found a way to keep FSU Clemson happy for now. Most of the Pac-12 didn't jump until they had no other choice. Be interesting if the ACC can give middle tier a real choice when things open back up again in 31 and 36. Of course, that's 2031, 2036. One more note. This is from an attorney. David McKenzie's been following this and other particular realignment type news. Today's resolution begins the next chapter of this storied league and further solidifies the ACC as a premier conference. That's the quote from ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips. But McKenzie's not a fan of it, saying he needs to get a second PhD in wishful thinking and third in blinking.
Yeah, now where there is some truth in this is an opportunity for the next 5 years for the ACC to try and make a move. The Big 12 is trying to do that too. I mean, every time we talk to Brett Yormark, you hear him talking, he is, setting up this new Big 12 with the 16 teams for that next TV deal. That's where every move is going because it's not going to happen overnight. So the ACC has an opportunity here for 5 years. But at the end of 5 years, if you think that there's not going to be a shakeup or he thinks that this problem is solved, I think that that's naive because, we've seen now the last few times that TV contracts have come up, there's a shakeup. So what's to say that won't happen again? So the ACC has 5 years to be ready on all fronts, to be ready to maybe be an elite conference in football, or be ready to be a completely different thing altogether.
One other note, Craig, and then go ahead. You go ahead and respond to that. I'll follow up.
Yeah, so I think the only way it really could have gone worse in my eyes for the ACC was if they would just announce that everybody's free to go right now. Beyond that, I think they basically let you know that here's the get out of jail pass if that's how you feel as a Florida State fan or as a North Carolina fan or a Clemson fan or a whoever fan that's looking at jumping over the fence to the greener quote-unquote pastures. I think yesterday was your slip to go on this field trip here in 5 years and go explore what else is out there. I don't know how you really read that any other way. I see from their standpoint of it being a positive for the ACC that it's not being fully dismantled right now, and it's not like, hey, there's zero buyout. Florida State can leave today, and that's it. But beyond that fact, I don't know how they really won this because I do think it raises a lot of questions. And look, it's kind of also a fool's errand to declare winners and losers 24
Absolutely.
hours after a decision that we have no idea how it's going to play out or what 5 years from now looks like. I mean, we've made all these assumptions about so many different things, and typically they don't go exactly as expected. But, on paper, which is a phrase I like to use a lot because it's actually the facts that we have to deal with, I think this was a much bigger win for the schools that are looking for a jump here in a few years than it was for the conference. But as the commissioner and to kind of soothe the souls of those who aren't those looking to jump over the fence here in the near future, I think you've got to celebrate what you can, right? So the fact that it's not dismantling right now and the fact that you do have 5 years to maybe figure out some other options that maybe turn this into a much better ACC than you could have imagined, even if some teams leave, there is that hope. So there's hope. And, yeah, you gotta use that as a motivation to have these schools go and get things done and try to be the best versions of themselves, just like the Big 12 schools got a kick in the ass when everything went down. I mean, hey, Wake Forest and Louisville and whoever else, like if you care about this conference and you're not already planning your exit, like we got to get our stuff together and we got to really work hard these next 5 years. So that's the message you have to deliver. But, yeah, everybody who's really paid attention to this, we're all side-eyeing him and going, we know you have to say that, but, like, you didn't really win anything yesterday. You just won 5 years of time, basically.
I would love to hear Jim Phillips come out and just be frank one time going, like, look, Not ideal.
We bought ourselves some time. For right now, we're okay, but we have work to do.
They bought themselves time. Is exactly the way to put it.
Like, I would like him to come out and say, here's the message I'd like to send. Florida State, Clemson, anybody else who's thinking about leaving, we're going to spend these next 5 years proving you wrong and making you want to stay. And anybody else, we're doubling down on everything that we need to do to be competitive in this. But that's not how Jim Phillips does things. So that's where I'd like to see him change.
Here's from David McKenzie. I got some quotes that are not tweets, etc. FSU and Clemson just proved they cannot be trusted. This, again, different opinions. That's what we do here. It's not one-sided, although sometimes we can all have the same opinion. The ACC settlement with FSU and Clemson isn't a show of strength. It's an admission of weakness. After months of legal maneuvering, courtroom theatrics, baseless sovereign immunity arguments, the conference has now rewarded two of its most disloyal members with more money and a structured escape hatch. If this is stability, it's built on sand. Let's be clear, FSU Clemson are the most unreliable contract partners in college athletics. They signed a 20-year grant of rights in 2016, enjoyed every financial benefit, and then spent the last 15 months trying to wriggle free using the most dubious legal strategy available, sovereign immunity.
Yeah, and I didn't get into the weeds on like all the actual court details and all that, but I followed along pretty closely. And the FSU lawyers were some busy folks. There's no doubt about that. I agree with him that they are not to be trusted. They're very much in the vein of an OU Texas, except for OU and Texas never quite just said outwardly, like, we're leaving in 5 years and we're suing you to get out and get out cheaper and all that. And they never pulled those moves. They just did it even more nefariously, just in the middle of the night without much warning. Even though, looking back, there were little warnings along the way, but not to the extent that you would have anticipated. What dropped the morning Brett Zorneman just blew the top off of the story before it was set to be released. But, I would not trust them whatsoever. I don't sing Kumbaya around the ACC campfire this summer with them. I kicked him out to the curb, if anything, on a lot of matters. You can't really do that in terms of some of the decisions that have to be made. But, if you're any of these other schools, it's not Clemson, North Carolina, I mean, maybe like a Georgia Tech or somebody like that, then, you don't trust them. You don't think they have your best interest in mind. And clearly they've had only their own self-interest in mind. And you know what? It paid off for them because they got what they wanted in the end. There was two camps I saw of Florida State fans yesterday. The one main camp altogether was celebrating the fact that this was basically a win for them. I mean, and not even basically, it was a win for them because they got pretty much all that they wanted. So it was a win. And most people were celebrating that. But then there was the other camp that was frustrated because they really thought that they were going to get out like right now. Like they had been led to believe that they were getting out and they were going to be in the SEC or the Big Ten like by 2026. And that's probably not happening unless you just want to cut a check for no real reason to rush into this thing for $180 million or whatever it's going to be. So there was a few people disgruntled. But then, once you get over like, I can't have my way right this second, but you're still going to get your way. You just got to be a little bit more patient. I think everybody was excited about what Florida State pulled off, and the other schools that are in similar spots, they seem to be excited about it as well. And the ACC fans, the fans of the teams that are like NC State and Boston College, they were the ones left going, well, what do we get? Like, where are we now in all of this? Because you just gave them, the traitors, the ones that are trying to sink the conference, you just defaulted and gave into them and gave them everything they wanted and more.
And even more.
And
than
more.
What the Alston, the president, yeah, even more.
You gave them what they wanted and more. And so, yeah, if you're those other schools, like, you're probably pissed. But the only thing I can imagine is there had to be something legally where you just felt like it wasn't worth pursuing any longer. What, if it was you thought that you could win, but maybe it was going to take another couple years and that's just not really feasible, or you just look at the money being burnt and you go, we can't keep doing this. This is not good for the conference. I don't know, but something made them sit down and trigger that deal yesterday. So that's going to have to be answered at some point by Jim Phillips on why they went ahead, especially when it seemed to be so one-sided.
David Hale, who covers the ACC, we had Murphy on, we had David Hale on. His question was, did FSU and Clemson win? Short answer, yeah, mostly. If the ultimate goal was to exit the ACC as soon as possible and land a full share in the SEC or the Big Ten, as Oklahoma, Texas, UCLA, and USC did, then no, this isn't the ideal outcome. But everything else is pretty great for them. And, Paul, you mentioned this, and you've mentioned it more than once. This now is the clock is ticking. David Hale, there's a big clock ticking. It's, in a good way, a sign of progress for the ACC that has always fallen behind the rest at times. Worst case scenario for the remaining ACC team, let's say 4 schools leave for another conference. That's $300 million in a payday to remaining members. That's still not nothing. And combined, without being reduced, ESPN deal. It's enough to survive a bit longer. Survival is the game now. Don't wait again until you're in this position. Work and react to it so you're not the next time.
Yeah, I mean, that's where Jim Phillips, I mean, he's had these moments where he sacks up for a minute. He's like, yeah, earlier when they kind of made the statement about where they felt they were. He's like, yeah, we're tough in the ACC. And then immediately after that, he comes out with hey, we're positioned to be great. Okay, yeah, maybe, but you need to send a message across the thing of, here's the thing they need to say out loud, which they haven't. Do you want Florida State and Clemson to stay? Do you want the teams to stay? Say it out loud. Say it out loud emphatically that we want you to be in this league. And we've done these things to make you happy to stay in this league. And we're going to prove to you that leaving this league in 5 years will be bad. We want to prove that to you. You don't need to kiss their ass, but you have to say it out loud. Then you need to tell the other teams, what can we do to prove these assholes wrong? That's what you need to do. And they're not doing that.
The only real win yesterday for the ACC, and again, I hope the conference is fine, and I hope there's no more of this in 5 or 6 years, but we all know there's going to be all sorts of collateral or shrapnel. Would that not have been stunning if they would have had enough power to get both of those 2 schools, Clemson and FSU, to get more money, get higher percentages of the revenue sharing, and sign an extension? That would have been basically the only real win, but they did push back the alarm clock for another 5 years.
Well, that would have been what's best for college sports, is to have the ACC, all of these people that are rooting for the death of it now suddenly because they want to be vultures and go pick the carcass apart. I understand that, this feeling of conquering new lands and whatnot, you're playing a game of Risk and you're getting new territory. That's very much the feeling there was with the Big 12's pursuit of the pack. And remember when the Big 10 had no interest in Oregon and Washington? You remember that the whole time? They have no interest. They absolutely had interest. That was all BS. And so we know there's vultures swirling, and they've been circling around the ACC for a couple of years now. I think the Big 10 and the SEC are certainly 2 of those birds in the air right now, and the Big 12's the other. And I don't know exactly how they're flying at the moment, but they're circling this, and they're watching very intently to pick the bones, if at all possible. And so, yeah, Jim Phillips has got to figure out not only how you survive these 5 years, but, what's the long-term plan and beyond. But, yeah, yesterday was not a good day for him or for the, league itself, because it does look like 2 of their rebellious kids got their way. And their way is basically they get to move out of the house earlier than anticipated. And before they move out, you're giving them more allowance, and you're giving them a new car, and you're giving them, no curfew.
A credit card with no limit.
And they're getting all this stuff they didn't even ask for almost, it feels like. And it's very puzzling because that's not the way this is supposed to work. It's kind of backwards. But It's worked for them. And so, yeah, for the ACC, what is the plan moving forward? And you have to be aware that everybody's looking at the other teams that are sitting there going, we could use that one. We'd love to have that Clemson team. They'd be great here in the Southeastern Conference or in the Big Ten or whatever. Like, that's going on. So you're going to have to, fend off that and all of the, subversion and story leaks and PR moves and everything else that's going to be coming out over the next few years in regards to the stability or lack thereof of your conference.
Go Black 45, Paul and Craig. He never, Phillips, mentioned how UNC was going about the same thing behind their back. ACC was disloyal by doing everything that Notre Dame wants, even if it hurt the entire conference.
Yeah,
Thank you for the chat.
I think that, look, this is a conference that has weird influences on all corners of it. They're football-wise a conference that only 2 teams regularly win the thing and have done anything. They're a conference that's aligned with Notre Dame that gets to play games against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is now telling them which games they would like to play as opposed to the even rotation that they had. So...
And they have all the sway in that relationship Notre Dame does.
Yeah, there's no, what's the ACC going to tell them? No,
fine, you go to the Big Ten then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the only card they have to play is they know that Notre Dame doesn't want to deal with the Big Ten because Notre Dame can't go to Ohio State. Well, we think this, and Ohio State can go, yeah, we don't care. So they can do that. They can be the mover and the shaker in that conference and not be fully in it and not in it at all for football and say, here's who we'd like to play every year. We'll play 5 games, but 3 of them better be against your good teams because we want the TV numbers.
Yeah, you're dictating the schedule.
Well, I think you left off there. There's also Tobacco Road and their longstanding, hold of how you define their power and their influence and obviously the basketball piece of this, which has not always been the best North Star to follow. There's the Notre Dame piece. There's the Florida State, Clemson, and the disgruntles. There's the Tobacco Road schools, although I know North Carolina a part of that. But, I think maybe in terms of not singling out North Carolina, if I heard that correctly, I think just because they're not part of this particular chapter. So yesterday, to me, was just about Florida State and Clemson since that's where the lawsuits were all focused in on, and so they settled with them. And it did have widespread ramifications, but I think that's probably why he wasn't taking a jab at North Carolina. And he's also not really in a position to jab at anybody at the moment, I don't think, if you're Jim Phillips either.
Is the Pat 40, is that audio, Garrett? Are we allowed to it's a video. Are we allowed to use that?
Sure.
It's 40 seconds. Here's Dan Wetzel, Yahoo Sports, will join us today at 3:40. We will also have other guests throughout the show today, including Phil Snow, recharged, and will join us today at 4. John Cooper on the NFL Draft Combine, and John Wilner from the perspective of Stanford and Cal and what they're looking at, and also just the fact that he covers college football. Here's a 40-second clip on the reaction to the ACC settlement with Clemson and also Florida State.
ACC. Beyond that, though, bad signals and further inequity. And I think, honestly, you're going to have schools, I would imagine, that are, on the shorter end of this stick. They're going to be looking at their options and saying, you know what? I'm Louisville. I'm Pittsburgh. How's Big 12 doing? Do we need to possibly look at going someplace else where we're going to get a better revenue shake? I wouldn't say it's out of the question for schools that aren't just, steeped in loyalty to the ACC and maybe feel like they have been handed a bad deal here. So, I don't say they're going to get up and leave now, but you watch in 5 years and see what the possible exit plans are.
Again, the ACC is getting more money per team, per school than the Big 12. It's a little bit more, but it's more. And then you have to look at the value of what actually that would bring. But we're getting ahead of it. But I wanted to put that out there because that was also a reaction from others not being a part of what they think might be that revenue scratch, so to speak. But go be a part of it, Louisville and Pitt. Go win your games, and you get also more in your coffers.
Yeah, don't let Texas win the championship on the way out, or in this case, North Carolina or Clemson or whoever. Don't let them win the ACC these last few years that you're going to be a part. But, yeah, it's only natural. I mean, there's a lot of talk about, what happens next, obviously. I think yesterday just really kickstarts that because it's real. It's not like there's this lawsuit with no end in sight. It could go on for 2 more years. It could go on for 2 more months. And, you just don't know. You're just talking about it. Yesterday is actually something real and legitimate. So now you can go, all right, clock starts now, and it's 5 years, and what happens between now and then, and what's going to happen certainly is everybody else on the outside, like I just referred to the vultures that are swirling. Yeah, Greg Sankey's out there going, is this the way that I get Clemson and bring them into the league, or whoever he might be eyeing? And certainly the Big Ten we know would be interested. And yeah, I think the Big 12 would be ready there to pick apart some of the bones as well and bring in some of the teams that would logically make sense. And Louisville certainly at the top of that list. I do think that's probably a little bit more of a ways out given this just happened yesterday. But it's just logical to think about that now, knowing that there's not a 2036 date that's rock solid, and there's not a lawsuit that's never ending. It's like the lawsuit's over, the timer started, and so, yeah, everybody scramble to their jets and figure out what you can get done here. And I would imagine Brett Yormark was more than ready, had the plane fueled up, and was ready to hop in the cockpit and go do whatever he needed to do, and we'll be ready. And I know we'll talk to him probably here in the next few weeks, and this will be brought up. But, yeah, just naturally – there's only 3 conferences really left standing of the old power, or there's still 4 with the ACC. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, and the Pac still exists, but it's not a part of that group now at this point. But yeah, it's just natural that just like when the Pac fell apart and everybody took a look, and the only one who didn't take a bite was the SEC, but the ACC now wounded and struggling, there's going to be all those other leagues taking a look at how they can better themselves. But it does become a lot more complicated, the TV deals and what you get added if you added certain amounts and this and that. But I guess those are discussions for later on. But, yeah, certainly everybody's swirling right now and looking at what they can potentially take here in the next few years.
We cover the Big 12, but we cover all of college football. And the ACC has some pretty damn good logos outside of the ones that just kind of feel like they got taken care of a little bit more than others.
And I should say, to Pat Forty's point, not just the vultures of the conference leader circling, but yeah, the schools themselves that are in that league now have to start going, well, we can't just plan for this in 5 years. We have to start kicking the tires, and I'm sure they already all have been, because the one thing about realignment that doesn't probably get stated enough is they're all talking to each other all the time. This isn't just out of the blue moon. I'm sure there's a cold call here and there, but there's always conversation going on because things are always changing. So I'd imagine there's already been plenty of talks, if you're Louisville, with everybody imaginable. It wouldn't make – they're not going to go to the Big Ten, but I guarantee you somebody from there at some point has talked to somebody from the Big Ten just to kick tires and go would there ever be a possibility? And the answer might have been absolutely not. But you've at least kicked the tires on that idea. And everybody's going to kick the tires on every idea imaginable to best situate their individual school, just like when Oklahoma and Texas left. Everybody didn't go kumbaya originally. They pretended to. But Oklahoma State and Baylor, Kansas, and TCU, and Kansas were all calling the Big Ten, and they were all calling the SEC, and they were all calling the ACC, and they were like, so what do you think? If this were to fall? And so that's absolutely what the ACC schools have probably been doing, knowing that this was going to come at some point in time, but are certainly doing as of right now.